She thought she was humiliating a servant. But the waitress she drenched in red wine wasn't staff at all. When the real guest list was revealed, her face turned white. The CEO she wanted to impress stood up slowly and said, "You just insulted the woman funding your husband's company." The ballroom of the Imperial Grand Hotel shimmered in gold light. A string quartet played softly near the grand staircase, while servers glided between tables carrying glasses of champagne. The night was meant to celebrate the signing of a billion-dollar partnership between Langford Dynamics and Hoshin Group, Japan's leading tech empire. Every corner buzzed with quiet conversations. Investors, politicians, and industry heads smiled through rehearsed charm. Cameras flashed every few minutes, catching expensive smiles and polished gestures. At the center of the room, Richard Langford, founder of Langford Dynamics, stood with his wife, Vanessa. Her gown, deep red silk with a long slit, drew as much attention as her voice, loud, confident, and a little too sharp. "This is it, Richard," she said, scanning the crowd. "Kenji Tanaka himself is here. Once this deal is signed, we're untouchable." Richard nodded, his expression tight. "Let's just keep things professional tonight." "No drama," she gave him a look. "Drama? I'm the reason you even got half these people in the room." He didn't answer. He was already watching the doors, waiting for the arrival of Kenji Tanaka, the CEO of Hoshin Group, a man known for his calm, precise decisions and dislike for arrogance. Richard had rehearsed every line he would say to him. This deal meant expansion, new factories, new markets, everything. Across the room, a small catering team worked quietly near the bar. Among them was Mia, dressed in the same black and white uniform as the others, though hers looked a little loose at the shoulders. She didn't rush like the others. She moved carefully, eyes scanning the tables, making sure every detail was right. "Table 7 needs fresh glasses," the head waiter reminded her. "I'm on it," Mia said softly. Her voice was calm, polite, the kind that didn't draw attention. As she walked toward the Langford's table, Vanessa was already chatting with a group of women from the press. "Honestly, the service here has gone downhill," Vanessa said, sipping her champagne. "You'd think for a 5-star event they'd at least train their staff to smile properly." The women laughed lightly, the kind of laughter that sounded rehearsed. Mia arrived with a tray of wine. She placed each glass with care, silent and professional. When she reached Vanessa's side, the woman didn't even glance up. She was too busy talking. Mia leaned slightly forward to pour, steady as ever. But just then, Vanessa turned abruptly, her hand brushing the tray. A stream of red wine spilled down her sleeve. The table went quiet for a second. Vanessa stared at the stain, disbelief turning to anger. Mia froze. "I'm so sorry, ma'am." Vanessa stood up sharply, her chair scraping against the marble floor. "Do you even know what you've done?" Eyes turned toward them. The music went on, but the air felt heavier. Richard whispered, "Vanessa, please." The ballroom doors opened wide, and Kenji Tanaka stepped in with a small group of executives. His presence changed the air immediately. Conversation softened. Cameras turned. Even the quartet missed a note before recovering. He was tall, calm, and sharply dressed, the kind of man who didn't need to announce power. It followed him quietly. Richard straightened his jacket at once. "Mr. Tanaka," he called out, forcing a smile. "Welcome, sir. What an honor to have you here." Kenji gave a polite bow. "Mr. Langford," he said in a low, steady voice. "I've been looking forward to this evening." But his attention shifted mid-sentence. Just a few feet away, Vanessa stood glaring at Mia, her sleeve still wet with red wine. The silence around their table hadn't gone unnoticed. Vanessa's tone dripped with sarcasm. "I suppose this is how your hotel trains its staff. Ruin a guest's dress and smile about it?" Mia bowed slightly, her voice calm. "It was an accident, ma'am." "I truly apologize." Kenji's eyes lingered on her for a moment. There was something in her composure that didn't fit the scene. No panic, no excuses. Just quiet dignity. He said nothing, but the smallest trace of recognition crossed his face before he turned back to Richard. Richard tried to laugh it off. "Just a little mishap, nothing serious." Vanessa wasn't done. "Nothing serious? This dress costs more than she'll make in a year." A few nearby guests glanced away awkwardly, pretending not to listen. Kenji's assistant whispered something in his ear, but he didn't reply. He watched Vanessa for another second, his expression unreadable. Mia stepped back quietly, her hands steady as she collected the empty tray. "I'll replace your drink, ma'am," she said softly. Vanessa waved her off. "Don't bother. Just stay away from this table." Richard's face tightened. "Vanessa," he muttered under his breath, "please stop. You're making a scene." She lifted her chin. "If they want professionalism, maybe they should start with their staff." Kenji finally spoke, his tone calm but firm. "Perhaps," he said, "it is best to judge professionalism by how one handles a mistake." The words hung in the air. Vanessa blinked, caught off guard. "Oh, of course, Mr. Tanaka," she said quickly, forcing a laugh. "You're absolutely right." Mia bowed again and left quietly, vanishing into the catering section. The moment passed, but a strange unease settled over the table. Kenji glanced at his watch. "Shall we discuss the partnership in the private lounge?" "Of course," Richard said eagerly. "Right this way." As they walked away, Vanessa whispered, "You see? It's fine. He doesn't care." But she was wrong. Kenji's last look before leaving the room wasn't at Richard. It was toward the service corridor where Mia had disappeared. Inside the private lounge, the lights were softer, the noise of the ballroom replaced by the quiet hum of the city through tall glass windows. Silver trays of sushi and fine wine waited on the side table. Richard guided Kenji toward the long glass table, trying to act as if nothing awkward had just happened. "It's truly an honor," Richard began, placing the contract folder on the table. "Langford Dynamics has been waiting years for this partnership. With Hoshin Group's technology and our global reach, we could—" Kenji raised a hand gently. "Please," he said, his voice calm. "Before we begin, may I ask something?" Richard froze slightly. "Of course, anything." Kenji looked toward the door where 2 hotel staff members stood waiting for instructions. "The young woman who was serving wine earlier," he said. "The one your wife spoke to. Could you have her come here?" Richard blinked. "Mia?" He gave an awkward laugh. I'm sure that's unnecessary, Mr. Tanaka. She's just a staff member." Kenji's tone didn't change. "Please, I'd like to speak with her briefly." Vanessa shifted in her chair. "Oh, I assure you, Mr. Tanaka, she's just a clumsy waitress. There's no need to—" Kenji turned his head toward her, not unkindly, but with a look that silenced her instantly. "It would mean a great deal to me," he said simply. Richard forced a smile, trying not to look confused. "Of course. I'll have someone call her." He motioned to the staff by the door. "Find, the waitress named Mia. Tell her Mr. Tanaka would like to speak with her quickly." The door closed behind the staff, leaving a heavy silence. Vanessa crossed her legs, tapping her manicured nails on the table. "This is strange," she whispered. Richard didn't respond. He could feel the sweat forming under his collar. Minutes later, the door opened again. Mia stepped in quietly, still wearing her catering uniform, her expression calm. "Sir?" she said, bowing slightly toward Kenji. Kenji gave a small nod. "Thank you for coming." He gestured to the seat across from him. "Please have a seat." Mia hesitated. "Sir, I'm part of the staff." "I shouldn't—" "I insist," Kenji said. Richard blinked again, unsure what was happening. Vanessa looked visibly uncomfortable. "This is highly irregular," she murmured under her breath. Mia sat slowly, hands resting on her lap. She didn't look scared, just respectful. Kenji studied her for a long moment before speaking. "You've changed," he said quietly, almost to himself. Mia's eyes flicked up in surprise. Then she smiled faintly, the first real expression she'd shown all night. "It's been a long time, Mr. Tanaka." The room went completely still. Richard looked between them, confused. You two know each other?" he asked. Kenji didn't answer. He simply looked at Mia, a look not of recognition alone, but of respect. But she didn't stop. Her glare burned through the quiet, and at that moment Kenji Tanaka entered the ballroom. Back in the ballroom, the atmosphere had shifted. The music still played, glasses still clinked, but every conversation carried the same curious tone. Someone had seen the waitress, the one who'd spilled wine, being escorted into the private lounge with Kenji Tanaka himself. "Are you sure?" one guest whispered near the bar. "I saw it with my own eyes," another replied. Mr. Tanaka asked for her personally. But why would a billionaire CEO want to meet a waitress? By the time the rumor reached the press table, it had already changed shape. Some said she was being fired in person. Others claimed she had somehow known Tanaka before. Each version carried its own spark of disbelief. At the Langfords' table, Vanessa felt the eyes on her. Every whisper, every passing glance made her sit straighter, her jaw tight. She leaned toward Richard. This is getting ridiculous. Everyone's talking about that girl. Tell them it's a misunderstanding. Richard sighed. Vanessa, stop. We don't even know what's going on. She humiliated me in front of everyone, and now she's having tea with the man we're supposed to impress? You call that nothing? Across the room, the hotel manager hovered near the lounge doors, unsure what to do. He'd tried peeking in once, but a polite look from one of Kenji's assistants had stopped him cold. Whatever the meeting was about, it wasn't for staff to question. Inside, Mia and Kenji sat across from each other at the quiet glass table. Richard and Vanessa watched in growing confusion. Kenji spoke first, his voice still calm. It's been nearly 10 years, he said. I didn't expect to see you here. Mia nodded slightly. Neither did I. Life takes strange turns. He gave a faint smile. Still working quietly, I see. It's easier that way, she replied. Vanessa couldn't take it anymore. Excuse me, she interrupted, forcing a laugh. I'm sorry, but what's happening here? You two know each other. Kenji's eyes shifted to her, then back to Mia. Yes, he said simply. We've worked together before. Worked together? Vanessa repeated. You mean she served you before? Mia didn't flinch. Something like that, she said quietly. The answer wasn't enough, but it silenced the room again. Kenji leaned forward slightly. Tell me, he said, are you still consulting independently or? Mia shook her head. I stepped away from the field. I only came tonight because the catering team was short on staff. That single line hit Richard like a riddle. Consulting field? None of this fit what he thought she was. Kenji's voice softened. You never change, Mia. Always helping quietly, never announcing who you are. Mia smiled. And you never miss a detail. Through the glass walls, Vanessa could see guests outside turning their heads toward the lounge, whispering again. The music sounded distant now, drowned by curiosity. Richard leaned back slowly, his confidence starting to fade. Something about this woman didn't add up, and whatever it was, he sensed it could change everything. The doors to the private lounge opened. Heads turned instantly. Kenji Tanaka stepped out first, followed by Mia, who still wore her simple catering uniform. Conversations paused mid-sentence. The quartet's music faded into the background as everyone tried to understand what they were seeing. Vanessa's hand tightened around her clutch. What is she doing with him? She hissed under her breath. Richard stood halfway up from his chair. I don't know. Kenji spoke to his assistant quietly, then turned toward the main table where several global investors sat. Mr. Langford, he said, his tone polite but firm. I'd like to continue our discussion here, with everyone present. Richard nodded quickly, trying to recover his composure. Of course, Mr. Tanaka, whatever you prefer. But when Kenji pulled out a chair beside him and gestured for Mia to sit, the entire room froze. Even the hotel staff near the wall looked uncertain. Vanessa whispered harshly, She can't sit there. That's for guests. Kenji looked at her. She is my guest. Vanessa's lips parted in disbelief, but she couldn't find words. The sound of a single champagne glass clinking on a tray somewhere broke the silence. Mia sat down gracefully, folding her hands on her lap. She didn't look around or react to the stares. Her calmness made the moment feel even more unreal. Kenji adjusted his cufflinks. Before we proceed, he said, looking around the table, I'd like to acknowledge someone who played a vital role in Hoshin Group's early development, someone whose insight shaped much of our global strategy. Every head turned toward Mia. Vanessa frowned, whispering to Richard, He's not talking about her, right? Richard didn't answer. He couldn't. Kenji continued. When I founded our research division years ago, there was one analyst whose mathematical models saved us from collapse during a financial storm. She never took public credit, never sought recognition, but her work changed everything. The investors leaned forward, interested now. Kenji looked directly at Mia. It's good to see you again, Ms. Reynolds. The name hit Richard like a shockwave. Reynolds? That was the name on the signed consultancy reports he'd read during merger research. the one financial expert still referenced as a legend. Mia gave a small nod. "Thank you, Mr. Tanaka." A murmur spread across the room. People whispered, glancing between her and Kenji. The waitress was suddenly someone very different. Vanessa tried to speak, her voice shaky. This can't be right. She's just..." Kenji's calm voice cut through. "She is one of the most brilliant financial minds I've ever met." The room went silent again. Outside the lounge, word was already spreading. The story of the waitress who had taken a seat beside a billionaire was traveling from one guest to another, whispered in disbelief, repeated in awe. For a long moment, no one spoke. The ballroom, at once filled with music, laughter, and chatter, now stood in uneasy silence. The only sound was the quiet hum of the air conditioning and the faint echo of glasses trembling on tables. Vanessa looked as if she'd seen a ghost. "You're saying this waitress wrote those reports?" Kenji turned toward her. "She didn't just write them, Mrs. Langford. She designed the system that your husband's company has been trying to license for 2 years. Richard blinked, speechless. "You mean the H-model algorithm? The one we've been negotiating access to?" Kenji nodded once. "Yes, it belongs to her foundation." All eyes turned to Mia. She sat quietly, her hands still, her face calm. "When I left Hoshin Group," she said softly, "I built a small consultancy under my own name. I preferred working behind the scenes. Tonight I was only helping because the catering manager is an old friend who needed staff on short notice." Her words hit like a slow wave, soft, but undeniable. Vanessa's voice cracked. "You're lying. You can't expect anyone to believe you're some kind of financial genius." Kenji's tone sharpened just slightly. "Mrs. Langford, I do not deal in expectations. I deal in facts. Every major firm in Tokyo, Berlin, and Zurich has used Ms. Reynolds as models. Without her work, half of the companies in this room wouldn't have recovered after the 2018 crash." A hush fell again. Several guests began murmuring in recognition. One older man at the end of the table whispered, "Reynolds Consulting. I've seen her signature on our audit framework." Vanessa's face drained of color. She looked at Mia, then at her husband. "You knew about this?" Richard shook his head quickly. No. I thought she was just..." He stopped himself. Mia met his eyes, calm and steady. "Just a waitress?" Her tone wasn't bitter, just quiet. But it landed harder than any shout could have. Kenji leaned back in his chair. "Mr. Langford," he said evenly, "when I arrived tonight, I came prepared to finalize the $1 billion partnership between our companies. But after what I witnessed..." He paused, letting the words sink in. Richard swallowed hard. "Mr. Tanaka, please, that was a misunderstanding." "My wife," Kenji interrupted softly. "Respect is not a misunderstanding." Vanessa stood abruptly. "I didn't know who she was," she snapped. "She spilled wine on me." Mia rose slowly from her chair. "It was an accident, Mrs. Langford. But how we treat people before knowing who they are, that's what truly defines us." No one moved. No one spoke. Kenji turned to his assistant. "Cancel the signing. We will revisit our partnerships after internal review." The assistant nodded immediately, and just like that, the $1 billion deal was gone. The silence after Kenji's words felt heavier than any noise could have. Every camera in the room had gone still, waiting. No one dared to move until Richard Langford finally stood, his voice trembling. "Mr. Tanaka, please," he said quickly. "There's no need to cancel. We've worked for months." Kenji looked at him calmly. "I understand. But business is built on trust, Mr. Langford, and tonight, I saw how your company's culture treats those it believes are beneath it." His words were polite, but they cut deeper than any insult. Richard's face turned pale. "This isn't fair. My wife, your wife," Kenji interrupted gently, "represents your company's values, and she made them clear to everyone tonight." Murmurs rippled through the guests. Several investors exchanged uneasy glances, already sensing what the headlines would look like by morning. Vanessa's voice broke the quiet. "You can't do this," she shouted, stepping forward. "You came here to sign a contract, not judge me." Kenji didn't raise his voice. "I came here to build a partnership based on respect. That foundation no longer exists." Vanessa froze, speechless. Richard tried to steady himself. "Please, give us a chance to make this right." "Mia, tell him it was nothing. Tell him..." Mia looked at him, her expression calm but unreadable. "It was never about me," she said. "It's about how you treat people when you think no one important is watching." Those words lingered. The press table at the far end of the room caught every syllable. Kenji gave a small bow to the guests around him. "My apologies for the disturbance. I'll take my leave." He turned toward Mia. "Ms. Reynolds, my office will contact you." "I still believe in your work," she nodded politely. "Thank you, Mr. Tanaka." He walked out with his assistants, leaving behind a room full of silence and stunned faces. As soon as the doors closed, the whispers began again, louder this time, unrestrained. "Did you hear what he said? She owns the algorithm. She just cost Langford $1 billion. Vanessa's hand shook as she reached for her glass. "This is a nightmare," she whispered. Richard didn't answer. He was staring blankly at the unsigned contract on the table, the papers that now meant nothing. Across the room, Mia quietly returned her catering badge to the hotel manager. "Thank you for letting me help tonight," she said softly. He looked at her, still in shock. "Miss Reynolds, I had no idea." "I know," she said gently. "And that's okay." She picked up her small purse, tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, and walked out through the same doors the CEO had used, without a word. Without looking back, Vanessa watched her leave, her expression frozen somewhere between disbelief and regret. Outside, the flash of cameras began again, but this time it wasn't for her. The night outside the Ritz shimmered with rain. Streetlights reflected off the wet pavement as Mia Reynolds stepped out into the quiet, her shoes clicking softly against the marble. She didn't hurry. She didn't need to. Across the street, reporters were already gathering, their phones glowing like fireflies. She heard one of them whisper her name, uncertain, hesitant, as if afraid to believe it. That's her, the woman Kenji Tanaka called the owner. She kept walking, the hotel fading behind her. A valet offered her an umbrella, but she waved it away politely. The drizzle felt calm on her skin, washing off the stain of wine that had once burned with humiliation. Inside the hotel, chaos unfolded. Vanessa was surrounded by flashing cameras now, her perfect hair disheveled, her voice shaking as she tried to explain that it had all been a misunderstanding. Richard stood beside her, silent, pale, his phone buzzing nonstop with messages from investors pulling out one after another. On the mezzanine balcony, the banner for the Langford-Tanaka alliance still hung, half-torn where someone had tried to take it down. Beneath it lay the contract, unsigned, forgotten, and wet with spilled champagne. Mia reached the edge of the parking lot just as a black sedan pulled up. Her assistant, Ellen, stepped out holding the car door open. "Everything's ready, ma'am," she said quietly. Mia smiled faintly. "Did the documents go through?" "Yes," Ellen nodded. "Full withdrawal from Langford Systems completed. Press statement scheduled for morning. You'll be trending by sunrise." Mia glanced back once, just long enough to see the light from the ballroom flicker across the rain. "Then it's done," she said softly, getting into the car. As the door closed, she leaned her head against the seat and let out a long breath. Not satisfaction, not revenge, just release. The car moved through the city, passing neon lights and darkened shopfronts. Her phone buzzed once, a message from Kenji Tanaka. "For what it's worth, I hope we'll work again. You reminded everyone tonight what dignity looks like." She didn't reply. She simply looked out the window as the skyline blurred past. By dawn, every major outlet carried the same headline: Langford Systems loses $1 billion deal. After CEO's wife publicly insults unknown woman, who turned out to be the owner of rival firm. The photo beneath showed Mia walking out of the hotel, head high, hair wet, no guards, no crowd, just a woman who no longer needed to explain who she was. Back in the Langford penthouse, Vanessa sat on the floor of her dressing room, staring at her phone as the news replayed again and again. Her makeup streaked from tears she didn't even notice. Downstairs, Richard stood at the window watching the city wake. His empire, the one he thought he controlled, was already slipping away. And somewhere across town, Mia poured herself a cup of coffee, watching the sunrise with quiet eyes. No bitterness, no victory speech, just the peace of someone who didn't need applause.